Good evening. The First Minister has apologised tonight after a report found taxpayers lost out on tens of millions of pounds when publicly owned land was sold for less than its value. A committee of AMs called the sale cavalier and disturbing. The offshore firm, which bought 15 sites from the Welsh Government-run Regeneration Investment Fund for Wales, made £19 million profit by selling just some of them on again. Here's our political editor, Nick Savini.
Another report and another accusation that valuable land across Wales was sold on the cheap. This report from the Assembly's Public Accounts Committee will be the last into the £21 million sale. And it's the most damning yet. And it's the first to claim explicitly that the loss was in the tens of millions. It prompted Cadwyn Jones to make a rare apology during First Minister's questions.
The way that RIFU was managed fell well below the standards we would expect as a government, and for that we are sorry. It is true to say that the concept was good, but the delivery was flawed. And, of course, as members deserve, the government will give a full response.
The sites were sold without an open tender by the Regeneration Investment Fund for Wales, a body owned by the Welsh Government, to a company based in Guernsey called South Wales Land Developments, owned by one of Wales's richest men, Sir Stanley Thomas. The report says one of the sites in Rhys in the Vale of Glamorgan was bought from the taxpayer for less than £3 million. It's since been sold on for housing by South Wales Land Developments for £10.5 million. Another in Abergele was bought for £100,000 and sold for £1.9 million. And the so-called jewel in the crown at Lisvane on the edge of Cardiff was bought off the taxpayer for £1.8 million. The report says it now has a potential open market valuation of at least £39 million, although around a third of that will have to be repaid to the public purse in what's called a clawback arrangement.
When you look at some of the onward sales of those pieces of land, it's very difficult to defend the price at which they were sold. In fact, we think it's inexcusable.
This has been a long-running saga that's included an investigation by the Serious Fraud Office that came to nothing, internal inquiries, and a substantial report by the Public Spending Watchdog. The latest inquiry by the Assembly's Public Accounts Committee has been in the full glare of the public. Throughout, civil servants admitted there were failures in the way they monitored RIFU, but they've always said the decision needed to be taken in context. At one stage, the possibility of there having been a fire sale was even hinted at.
I remember discussions going on within the Welsh Government about a fire sale of all of our assets. That was seriously being considered at the time, putting the whole lot up in one block, and discussions about the fact that we might lose half of it being completely acceptable from a policy perspective, because there was such a need to get investment into the economy. Now, that's not what happened here, but that must have been at the back of people's minds.
The committee also found that the RIFU board was given the wrong sale price and the wrong timeline needed to complete the deal by its main property advisors. One of those advisors, Lambert Smith Hampton, insisted the deal was a good one.
There was an imperative to sell the assets in a timely manner. We were not under any impression that this was a fire sale, that we had to sell at any cost. Our duty was to obtain value, and we believe we did that.
What's beyond dispute is that RIFU failed in its objective of funding regeneration schemes in a speedy way in the financial crisis. Its one lasting legacy so far, this car park in Neath.
Well, you've been following this story for years and years. How significant is today?
Oh, I think it is a significant story. You know, with all the inquiries that we've had, sure, you've had people saying, look, lines of accountability could have been improved, monitoring could have been improved, but on the fundamental point about value for money for the taxpayer, there's been an almost institutional, deep-seated reluctance from civil servants, from professional advisors, from the board itself, to admit that that is what happened. And then we have a day like today. First of all, we have the First Minister making a public apology in the Senedd. You know, in my experience, Jamie, senior politicians really don't like doing that. I can't recall the last time we had an apology like that from the First Minister. And of course, it came off the back of a report that laid out in black and white that significant amounts of money are being made by the sale of this land to house builders, and most of that is not from the taxpayers. And you throw it all together, and I think it becomes very difficult now, after today, for anyone to stand up and credibly defend that deal. Now, people will say, look, you've got to go back in the context of the time and the decisions that were made. But at the time, it never went out to open tender. And this is what they've always been up against, that we're never able to categorically prove that there wasn't a better deal out there.
So what happens next?
Well, politically, former Conservative Welsh Secretary David Jones said if this happened at Westminster, there would be ministerial resignations. That's a point of debate. You know, we have stories like this at Westminster. Sometimes people resign, sometimes they don't. Certainly embarrassing from Labour's perspective. Opposition parties will try to keep this going. There is the possibility of legal action from some of the parties that have been involved. I have to say, though, Jamie, in terms of the people I speak to, there is no appetite for this to continue in some kind of long-running court case.
Nick Savini, thank you very much.